high teens in the south, but feeling a lot colder in eastern England and northeast Scotland with that really brisk wind that will continue to feed some heavy showers across parts of the extreme east as we go into Friday night. Elsewhere, the winds will start to ease. Long clear spells means a cold start to Saturday. A touch of frost is possible in the countryside to start the weekend, but generally it's going to be a dry and a bright day on Saturday. Still a few showers getting into parts of Norfolk and across Aberdeenshire, Caithness, Sutherland and the Northern Isles, but otherwise dry and bright on Saturday, just not particularly warm with temperatures in the mid to high teens at best. As we go through the weekend, that area of high pressure will continue to dominate. Temperatures will rise a little bit, but we'll see a bit more cloud developing on Sunday and Monday.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. It's been a day of restful reflection, so called for King Charles today, also known as a day off. And by goodness, he's earned it, hasn't he? He spent the day relaxing at his home in Highgrove ahead of a visit to Wales tomorrow. And here in London, it's been a day of respect for thousands of people who have filed past Her late Majesty's coffin at Westminster Hall. Were you one of them? If so, I'm fascinated to hear your stories and your experience of the days gone by. The nation, of course, is coming together in a shared experience as the final preparations are made for Queen Elizabeth II's funeral. We'll be talking about all of this and more, but first, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest news headlines.
Good evening, it's 1 minute past 6. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Queen's coffin will be laid to rest in the Royal Vault alongside her husband, the late Duke of Edinburgh. Further details have been released on the Queen's funeral next Monday. The state gun carriage of the Royal Navy will carry Her Majesty's coffin from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey for the service, which will begin at 11 o'clock. A national 2-minute silence will be held at the end of the service just before noon. Events will then move west to Windsor, where a smaller service for close family will take place at St George's Chapel next to Windsor Castle. Downing Street has said 200 key workers and volunteers have been invited to attend the Queen's state funeral. The list of people from the Queen's birthday honours list will be joining other world leaders and dignitaries. Royal households from a select number of European countries, as well as the Emperor and Empress of Japan, have also announced plans to attend. Russia, Syria and Afghanistan are among the countries that haven't been invited. Thousands of people have been queuing to pay their respects to the late Queen, who's lying in state in Westminster Hall. The King and royal family have expressed their gratitude for the condolence messages and tributes sent from people all over the world mourning the loss of Her Majesty. The queue of people visiting the Queen's lying in state is now more than 4 miles long, but some say they simply couldn't miss it.
I was lucky enough to be on Horse Guards yesterday. I saw the coffin go by with the Imperial State Crown on it, which was just absolutely amazing with it glistening in the sunshine. But I thought, you know what, I want to go to that grandeur of the ancient Westminster Hall and really see it and give my final bow to my monarch.
The scenery is so gorgeous in London, walking along the South Bank. So it's actually been really pleasant and we've had a lovely time, really, and looking forward to getting over the other side.
Just out of respect for the Queen, what she's not only done for the United Kingdom, but for the whole world. She was a figurehead for Canada, America, India. Everywhere she went, everybody adored her. And that's why we're here today, to say one last goodbye.
The Prince and Princess of Wales have been at Sandringham Estates this afternoon, where they've been looking at floral tributes left to Queen Elizabeth. Thousands turned up at the Norfolk estate to see them and pay their respects. Meanwhile, the Earl and Countess of Wessex have visited Manchester, where they've lit candles at the cathedral and looked at flowers left in the memory of the late monarch. King Charles has the day off from public duties before travelling to Wales tomorrow. In other news, the Treasury is reportedly considering scrapping restrictions on bankers' bonuses as part of a post-Brexit shake-up of the city. Newly appointed Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng is thought to be looking at changing the rules to make London more attractive for global banks. The European Union brought in the cap on bonuses, which is currently double a salary following the global financial crash in 2008. Mr Kwarteng is set to deliver a so-called mini-budget next week, as MPs are expected to return to the Commons after a period of mourning next Thursday. Hundreds of mourners have said goodbye to Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was shot at her home in Liverpool last month at a funeral service earlier on today. Police say she was killed by a gunman who struggled to shoot another man he chased into her home. Olivia's family asked everyone attending the funeral to wear a splash of pink in her memory. Pupils and staff at her school also did the same. A £50,000 reward has been offered in the search for her killer. Roger Federer has announced he's to retire from playing professional tennis, saying it's a bittersweet decision. The 20-time Grand Slam champion, who struggled with an ongoing knee issue, says he'll finish his competitive career after next week's Rod Laver Cup. The 41-year-old Swiss has thanked his family and fans for their support.
As many of you know, the past 3 years have presented me with challenges in the form of injuries and surgeries. I've worked hard to return to full competitive form, but I also know my body's capacities and limits, and its message to me lately has been clear. I am 41 years old. I've played more than 1,500 matches over 24 years. Tennis has treated me more generously than I ever would have dreamt, and now I must recognize when it is time to end my competitive career.
TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Hello there, I'll be with you until 7 o'clock this evening. Keeping me company tonight is the author and journalist Harry Mont and the sociologist at Swansea University, Ashley Frawley. Good evening to both of you. Now, a few of you have been in touch saying, Michelle, there's other news going on other than the Royals. Why are you focusing just on the Royals? Well, I shall tell you. I sat and I pondered this and I thought, which way shall I take the show? Shall I focus just on the royal things, or shall I look at the other news that is indeed happening in this country? And I'll be honest with you, we took the decision for the period of national mourning anyway to stay focused on the royals. And I don't know about you, but I'm quite enjoying the escape from some of the, let's put it mildly, negativity that has been going on in this country, and that seems to kind of pervade the news cycles sometimes. So I'm certainly enjoying focusing on, kind of the niceness of the togetherness, the ceremonies, the music, just the sense of community that I'm experiencing over these last few days. And if it's okay with you, I shall stay on that theme and resume normal business on Dewbs & Co. on Tuesday next week. And I want to involve you in these conversations about the royals as well. I want you to get in touch with me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address, or you can tweet me at gbnews. I want your stories, your thoughts, your reflections, your memories of our late Queen. Did you meet her? Get in touch, tell me your stories. I'll have some of your stories coming up throughout the programme. And if you're watching, not listening, you'll see on the screen as we speak. Live picture now coming in from Westminster Hall. That is, of course, where Queen Elizabeth is laying in state. Lots of people showing their respects. And I have to say, what a broad spectrum the crowd is there. You've got old, look, I mean, if you're looking at your screen there, and you've got, I don't mean to be rude, but quite an elderly man alongside quite a young child there. And that's the beauty for me that I've seen over these last few days. Just so many people from all walks of life, different nationalities, from all parts of the UK and way beyond, coming together, making friends, building memories and partaking in history in the making. This will be what our children, our grandchildren learn about in their schools for years and years to come. Phil has been in touch from Rugby saying, good evening, Michelle. Today I left Rugby at 6:03 a.m. I like the precision there, that's good detail. He left rugby at 6:03 a.m. He joined the back of the queue at Southwark Cathedral at 7:48 a.m, arrived at Westminster Hall at 1:30 and back home in time for Dewbs and Kerr. I love it. Do tell me your experience. He says he will sum it up in 3 words: worth the wait. What about you, Herm? Have you been to see the Queen? Are you going to see the Queen? Do you sit there and you're pontificating it, looking at the queue size, weighing it up? I've got to say that's the camp that I'm in. I see it and it's getting longer and longer, isn't it? So I haven't made my mind up yet. But tell me your thoughts. GBviews at gbnews.uk is the email address to get in touch. Now, in a poll commissioned this week by GB News, we asked people about the future of the monarchy. Where do you stand on this? Should it remain or should there be an elected head of state? Well, in the poll, 63% of the people asked agreed that yes, they were in favour of the monarchy. Are you one of those people? And 75% said Queen Elizabeth's legacy was good for Britain. And nearly 60% had a favourable impression of King Charles. I've got to be honest, I thought it'd be a bit higher than that, actually. Obviously, people do think very highly of the late Queen, but as you can see, there's 20% that haven't made their minds up about King Charles. Goodness me, I think that's a bit harsh. Henry, where do you sit on this? Let's talk, shall we, about the future of the monarchy. What will it look like? What should it look like?
Well, those figures, I agree with you, Michelle, are quite surprising because actually they fall within the range of popularity for the Queen and the monarchy of her whole reign, which has been between around 60% and 80% all that time, figures that politicians would kill for. The only time it dipped dramatically was at the death of Diana in 1997. So it looks like the sad death of the Queen hasn't increased the amount of people who support her, but I imagine it will intensify that feeling for her. And completely respect Republicans. I'm not one myself. I'd have thought very few Republicans would be likely to be converted to becoming monarchists by the last week.
Yeah, maybe like not a staunch Republican may not be converted, but I imagine that there's lots of people, perhaps that have been like me previously. I've never been really anti-royal, but I've kind of been on the fence, really. And I've probably never really spent that much time thinking about it. But I've got to say, the events of the last few days, they've really engaged me with the royal family. They've given me a lot of respect for the royal family. I look now at Charles, a man that's just lost his mum, straight into work, straight into duty, putting his country before his own feelings, his own sense of grief. And I hugely respect that. So for me personally, and I wonder at home, by the way, are you like me? Were you in the same camp as me? I suspect that a lot of middle ground people have been converted.
Well, it is one of the great attractions of the royal family that it is the ultimate family. Very few families where we know the names of a mother, her daughter, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. And I agree with you. I've just been to Green Park on the way to the studio here to see the huge piles of flowers left for the Queen. And there's a really extraordinary feeling there. I mean, I'm a monarchist anyway, but even if you weren't, there's something very unusually inspiring. People are very serious, but there's a tremendous friendliness. This crowd is not leaving a single piece of rubbish, I notice. And everyone, including very irritable people, including myself, they don't mind these big crowds. I normally hate crowds, but actually people are so good-natured to each other. I haven't heard a single cross word. I've been in London all this past week. And I think even if you aren't a monarchist, it's a completely remarkable occasion, particularly if, like me, you've been a Londoner all your life. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Yeah, I said this a couple of days ago and I got criticised because what I was saying is that being a Northerner, I do like to chat to people. I like to make small talk. I like to look at people.
Yeah. You're not like us grumpy Londoners.
Yeah, but I said that, and I said, actually, I'm noticing that over the last few days, people are getting eye contact, people are smiling, people are, like, just being good-natured and kind. And I got a lot of criticism saying, oh, that you're talking nonsense, Michelle. Londoners have always been friendly and open. I'm thinking...
No, you're quite right. In fact, I stood by the curb when the Queen's hearse went by a couple of nights ago in Hyde Park, just near the studio. And I'm normally very grumpy and unfriendly, but I started chatting to the people on either side, just almost naturally. And we had a chat, we were waiting for an hour, And it is very unusual. That doesn't normally happen.
Yeah, we have so few opportunities now to have these sorts of collective experiences, especially after the past 2 years. We're expressly discouraged from having collective experiences. I think there is that hunger and that drive for something that we can hold in common, that we can reach out. I spent the whole day today in cafes working, and yeah, that's the impression that I got. As I was walking down the street, there were tables that were sat, people who obviously were not in the same party, were talking to each other, and they were all talking about the Queen. And at the cafe that I was sitting at, they were all talking about the Queen, and they were strangers talking to each other and debating things like, hospital appointments being canceled on Monday. And they were saying, well, the Queen wouldn't have wanted that. That's not clearly what she had in mind, was not to cancel people's treatment, that sort of thing. And it was like people talking about political issues, but in a very jovial way, and we haven't seen that with all of the sort of tribalism and everybody at their throats. I feel like people want that kind of collectiveness, and you can feel that. There's that energy in the air.
Yeah, and I wonder, Henry, because, I alluded to it a second ago about other news and stuff. There's so many things that have happened to this country recently that haven't been that great, to put it mildly. And I think as a nation, we've been very divided over things like Brexit. We're then divided again over things like COVID and the reaction and response to that. We've then had this whole kind of political change, a new Prime Minister, which has kind of divided people again. And I wonder, because of course it's a sad event, a sad affair, but I wonder if it could be a catalyst for change, like lasting change. For people, like you just said, you were a bit grumpy, you wouldn't normally talk to people around that you don't really know perhaps. Can that be a lasting legacy, you think?
Well, I hope so, but people said similar things, didn't they, during COVID and the pandemic and during lockdown. They thought, would we have permanent changes in our behaviour? And I don't know about both of you, but on the whole, most of us sprung back to how we behaved before. So I imagine I will return to my grumpiness.
Will you?
Yeah, I don't take any pride, but this cannot last forever. I mean, it's a wonderful... What will it be? End up being almost 2 weeks, but I think gradually we will return to our characters. Most humans do.
And in fact, I think this will be a very short-lived surge in popularity, because already, for example, I'm Canadian, so I've been following the Canadian news. Obviously, Canada's part of the Commonwealth, and political figures initially sort of come together and saying, God save the king, this sort of thing. And almost immediately, the discourse online has shifted, where it's been, Prince Charles, shady connections to the Klaus Schwabs of the world, this sort of thing. And I think that the culture war is going to take this over very, very quickly. I think that the popularity that you just showed for King Charles is probably going to wane as, that tight-lippedness of the Queen fades away, and the sort of younger royals don't have that. We know full well what they believe about things, and that's going to cause a lot of controversy, I think, moving forward, and a lot of divisiveness.
Yeah, and this is interesting, isn't it? Because we saw King Charles, who so many of us have only ever known as Prince Charles, and we know his views, we know the charities that he's either been instrumental in setting up or kind of supporting. And, he said, didn't he, that was one of the things that he said, that he was going to be different, he was going to make some changes. But to Ashley's point, Henry, we know this person to a degree. We know his thoughts, his feelings. So can you just almost have a personality change and then adopt this kind of different layer of, I'm going to be neutral?
Well, I think, he said it in his speech the other day, and he said it before, that when he was Prince of Wales, he had more freedom to say what he wanted and to back those various campaigns. Now he realises he's got to be more neutral. And the other thing you realise, he's got a huge amount of things to actually do all day. I mean, this is unprecedented, having to spend his time in a very creditable way going around all the constituent nations of the United Kingdom. But as monarch, he'll have literally physical things he has to do all day. He'll have less time to indulge those causes, even if he wanted to. So I think he will just change, if only by logistics.
I've been asking you at home, by the way, your thoughts on all of this. Where do you stand on it? Are you someone who's feeling lots of sorrow at the moment? Are you more kind of feeling perhaps optimistic about the future. Are you someone that's sitting there saying, oh, Michelle, shut up and start talking about something else? Tell me, I want all of your thoughts tonight. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And I was just being specifically asking as well, have any of you met the Queen? Did you have any good reflections, any memories to share? One of my viewers, Sophie from Surrey, she had the fantastic privilege of meeting the Queen by accident when she visited Queen Mary University of London. Let's take a listen.
I had the very great privilege of meeting the Queen completely by accident when she visited Queen Mary College, University of London, probably in the early 90s, I think it was. And unfortunately, much to my shame, when I look back on it, I was a typically impatient student. They closed the library. I wanted them to reopen the library, and I was pretty much focused on that. And I hadn't expected to see the Queen, let alone meet her personally. So whilst I waited to be able to get back into the library, to my very great amazement, she suddenly burst out of the fire doors of the Queen's building, having escaped her security and her academic guides. Without missing a beat, she asked me whether I was enjoying university, what I was studying, all those lovely polite questions. And her eyes were twinkling at me, and her smile was really encouraging. She was really good at putting people at her ease, and I've heard other people say that, and it really is true. And I had this strange sense of familiarity, having grown up seeing images of the Queen on TV, but it was truly surreal to see her face to face.
Oh, I love it. Keep your stories coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tweet me @gbnews. Now, thousands upon thousands of people queued for hours and are still queuing as we speak, by the way, to see the Queen's lying in state. GB News reporter Paul Hawkins is at Lambeth Bridge with the queue. Good evening, Paul. How's it going? Michelle. Is the rain holding off?
The rain is holding off, actually. The weather is definitely playing ball with the queue continuing to move behind us, as you can see at the moment. It's stretching 4.6 miles all the way back to Southwark Park from where we are at the moment. The mood continues to be, one would even say, quite jovial. People are just getting on with it. They're making friends in the queue, passing each other's teas and coffees, taking breaks to go to the loo. Of course, it's such a well-organised, ordered system that you can do that. And when they get to the front, though, on the other side, we are told that the queue is slowing down. Once they enter the Great Hall just behind me, there's a huge security tent there. And once they have to have their bags checked, have their clothes checked, that is slowing the queue time down. So once you get over the bridge on the other side, the queue does slow down. But at the moment, it's moving along very nicely. People queuing from not just all parts of the UK, but from all over the world, all kinds of ages. They've come fairly well prepared, and at the moment, it's not too cold, it's not raining, and it's pretty decent weather for doing the great British pastime of queuing.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'll leave you to it, Paul. We'll catch up with you a bit later on. It's funny what he says there about the atmosphere almost being jovial, actually, because I went over yesterday, actually, to go and have a look, just to be among it, talk to people. And I have to say, and I almost felt a little bit guilty at points, because I quite enjoyed it. And then I had to keep saying to myself, Michelle, what are you doing? This is like people queuing up to go and see a coffin. It's not a fun event. But actually, there was a real, I felt anyway, like an upbeat, such a nice community atmosphere. People were full of kind of good spirits, making friends, chatting, and I enjoyed it.
Well, it's a celebration of a life. It's not a tragedy in the sense that obviously Princess Diana's death was a tragedy. This was someone who died too soon. Now, this is a life that was very long, that was very full, and was a life of a very respected person. And so it is a celebration of someone's life, but it is a tragedy in one sense. And I think, it's become a sort of a cliche, it's the end of an era. But in a more sort of social sense, it really is the end of an era, because we're seeing out the last of that generation. We're seeing out the last people who lived through the epoch-defining moments of the 20th century, and that was in their living memory. Who have living memories of the Second World War, for example, and she was in the center of all of that. She was, they called her the Queen of the World in some of her tributes. And, you know, in that sense, it is a tragedy. Like, I just lost my grandfather a few months back. He was 94 years old. And it felt really tragic. And it's sort of like, how is someone who's in their 90s, you know, how is that tragic, right? That's what we all want. We want to live to a ripe old age. But in a way, it was tragic because there's no one left to ask those questions to, you know? And so I think people want to be there. People want to queue because we are witnessing the end of something really important, the end of the long 20th century in a way.
Yeah, and what you're watching on TV now, by the way, if you're watching the picture with us tonight, you can see the guards actually changing over now, as they do very regularly. And I've got to say, I just find the whole kind of the colours, the sense of occasion, the traditions, I find it quite beautiful. And I have to say, Harry, I have to pinch myself because this is not the kind of person I don't think I was 2 weeks ago. I don't know what's happening to me.
Well, if you look at that screen now, one of the wonderful things about this coverage is going to, as it were, the greatest hits of British architecture. Westminster Hall might have a claim to be the best building in the whole of the United Kingdom. Amazingly, it was built by William Rufus, William the Conqueror's son, 900, almost 1,000 years ago, those walls are. Then the roof above it was built by Richard II, and it's an extraordinary, huge building. Until quite recently, you could just walk in. Now you have to go through security to go through it to get to the Commons. But it's a survivor of the Royal Palace, and the Palace Westminster is still called the Palace Westminster because it's still a royal palace. And so for those people in that building, it's incredible to go into that room, even when Her Majesty's coffin isn't there. But with that coffin there and those various members of the armed forces, it's a completely spectacular sight, which you will see, you know, once every 70 years.
Don't you just want to be there? That's the feeling that it is, because it's to say that you were there at the end of something, because the Queen had a mystique that I don't think her successors are going to have. And so this is really the last time you're going to be saying goodbye to a monarch that had some mystery, that had some values that are really gone now. You know, there were very few times where she broke with that kind of that stoicism, and now it's where everybody has become humanized, perhaps in a negative sense of like, come on, everyone, you know, the royals now are, everyone display your weakness. Let's talk about mental health constantly, this sort of thing. Whereas she represented that mystery. And we're not going to see that, I don't think, for King Charles. Will people be lining up like that?
Well, also the pure length of the reign, no disrespect at all to King Charles, but unless he lives to 143, we're not going to see a length of reign like that. So that is one of the most spectacular things. As so many people have been saying, it covers all our lifetimes. I'm the editor of a magazine called The Oldie, and we have some readers who are over 100. Some of them were born before the Queen. Wow. But from whenever they were sentient, they would have heard of Princess Elizabeth. So there's literally no one in this country, I'd say, who has been sentient and not been aware of her existence, and that's completely remarkable.
Yeah, and I like it when you see people taking their kids as well. And I've got to say, I will be wheeling my little one up in his pram somewhere in the vicinity, I imagine, on Monday morning, just so I can take some pictures of him, so that when he, you know, gets with it, I can say to him, look, you were there when you're learning about it at school. Mummy took you, there you are, eating your goodness knows what, your 27th snack to keep you quiet, and there you are, you're being photographed. And I do
remember I went to the Silver Jubilee pouring with rain in London when I was 5, and it's one of my earliest memories. I suppose it's such an unusual thing to do. I remember lots of bunting and Union Jacks, but it is very memorable because it's so unusual, a scene like this.
Yeah, and Ashley, one of the things that people are writing in about, and I find this is kind of, you know, but it divides people a lot, does this topic, about Harry. And people are saying, Mike's just emailed in about his uniform, whether or not he should be wearing uniform and all this and all that. And I think there's been a lot of focus put on Harry and Meghan, hasn't there, over the last few days. And I've got to say, some of it makes me a little bit uncomfortable because in places and in parts, I think it's just become quite nasty. Where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an awkward kind of situation for anyone who has been critical of the monarchy in the past. Obviously, when something like this happens, this is the time for example, for Republicans to come out and to, it's on the front page, it's on the headlines, now's the time to put forward your claims. But it's also the very worst time to put forward your claims because it's disrespectful. And so I did feel really bad for Prince Harry when he came out and people were booing and hissing at him because people know that what they've said about the firm, and the kind of negative light that they've put on it. And now they have to be seen very, very publicly at a time like this. I do feel quite bad. So it's going to be very difficult, I think. I mean, he had a book, a memoir, that was due out in November.
Yeah.
That's had to be pushed back. And that's going to be a very iffy kind of thing that's going to throw them into the spotlight again, and perhaps in a very, very negative light because of, it being so fresh, this death being so fresh.
Yeah, where do you stand on Meghan and Harry? See what I did there?
Well, I think the poor man, has lost his grandmother, and then he obviously lost his mother in tragic circumstances. The thing is, I think there's still a residual groundswell of affection for him, notwithstanding those boos. If he were to say in a couple of months' time, I've realised it was crazy to write a memoir, I love my grandmother so much, I'm stopping it all together, stop all the complaining about the royal family, I think we'd take him back into our hearts. If he does publish that memoir and it's full of more gripes about the royal family, and if he's at all rude about this occasion, particularly the not wearing military uniform, I think he's playing a very, very dangerous game then. But that's pure speculation.
Yeah, and there has been an awful lot of speculation, hasn't there, in the last few days? There's a part of me that just makes me kind of bristle a little bit because I think, some of the stuff that's getting said about particularly Meghan, it's not nice, it's not pleasant.
I agree, yeah. And in the same way that I think it's perfectly legitimate for Republicans to speak peacefully. Now, I thought the man who protested during in Edinburgh, fine to be a Republican, don't call Prince Andrew rude names just when his mother's died. So now let hostilities be put aside and then perhaps we return to our normal nature in a couple of months' time.
Yeah, and we're sticking on the screen. These are the scenes live in Westminster Hall, where Queen Elizabeth, of course, is lying in state. And I've got to be honest, I'm quite a nosy Parker. I do like people watching, and I find it fascinating. I could sit and watch this for quite some time because I just find the way that people react, people respond. These are people that have queued for hours and hours, for miles and miles. And I just find it quite fascinating what they do when they get in front of the coffin. I mean, obviously, you will be at some point seeing people like MPs who haven't queued. We discussed that yesterday with the Baroness, actually. Many people do actually get a fast track. We saw Theresa May there earlier on as well. They don't need to queue. I'm not a fan of that. I mentioned that yesterday. I was saying, actually, there's something about, because I was at the front of the queue yesterday, I saw many people that had sat there for nights, in some cases, sleeping on the pavement because they were so committed to that cause. And something about, you can fast track with your family if you're an MP or whatever. It makes me a bit uncomfortable, actually.
And it also shows, as you can see from those pictures, there is room for 2 more sets of rows down which the MPs and the peers go. They could be with other people there. It also shows, I'm always really interested in the bowing, that it's always said when you meet a member of the royal family, as a man you should bow, as a woman you should curtsy. The bowing, people are doing it almost naturally, isn't it? How do you show respect in silence? And they're doing it completely naturally. It's not awkward, and I find that very moving.
Yeah, and it's just such an assortment of people. Like I was just saying, young, old, different backgrounds, and some real characters. You see, don't you? Some real...
Nice character of a lady there.
There was, yes, there was a character.
Their hair funky colours.
Yes.
I mean, how odd is that?
Unbelievable.
Yes, if you're listening, not watching, I don't really know how to describe that lady that's just gone past. She looks very glamorous, flowers in her hair. Yes, made a real effort. Lots of people
I wasn't making fun of her, by the way. I was making fun of myself. I realised that you can't actually see me, but I've got some strange hair myself.
Oh, we don't mind a bit of strange hair.
But yeah, it's just an interesting sort of spectacle of bringing so many people together, and it kind of underscores one of the benefits of having a monarchy is, that we'll see on Monday, which is all of the world leaders coming together because they are ostensibly anyway politically neutral. It allows for, well, a continuity, but also to develop relationships with different world leaders that aren't on sort of partisan political grounds. So it's not, you can have a long-term relationship that isn't dependent on a particular leader and a particular set of politics. Now, obviously, I'm a Democrat. I believe in that human beings, the masses can govern, that we are capable of self-determination. But I can see that that's one of the clear benefits. And that sort of coming together of nations is one of the clear benefits of the Commonwealth, and one of the reasons why so many countries voluntarily have wanted to join the Commonwealth. There's the last few days, there's been some frankly ridiculous commentary from wannabe radicals, if I may say, where they would talk about all of the horrors of colonialism. Absolutely terrible things were done in the name of colonization, were done in the service of colonization. But the legacy towards the present has been, countries wanting to maintain those relationships of their own free will, of their own desire to maintain those ties. If you look at polls, for instance, in Nigeria, the majority of people see the British Empire as having had a positive effect on their education. And I think a lot of that decolonization discourse has really done a disservice to people in those countries, as though they are forever victims, forever victimized, as though they can't share in the wonderful things of like the Greek classics. We're humans. The classics are as much a part of my history. I haven't got a Greek cell in my body, but they're as much as part of my history and my legacy for my children as it would be for Nigerians. And I think there's a certain amount of what the Queen represents toward the present that is part of that more positive legacy of the monarchy.
Yeah, indeed. Let's go to one of our other viewers' stories, this time over to Anthony Gould with his reflections.
Came to me, saw the map of the Soviet bloc, Central and Eastern Europe, and said, "My goodness," she said, "that is the one part of the world I cannot travel to and have never been to. You must tell me all about it, about the people, about the cities you visited. Have you been to research establishment? What have you done?" She just fired question after question at me. So interested was she that it was very clear that she was wanting to learn about the former Soviet bloc and not just asking, out of politeness. She genuinely was interested. So was Prince Philip. And in the background, which she couldn't see, all her entourage were waving madly across, move her on, but they didn't say anything. She carried on for about 20 minutes with this conversation. Prince Philip asked a few questions as well. And then Prince Philip winked at me because he'd seen all the entourage waving her. And just as she was about to leave me, he said to her, "You do know Mr. Gould works for Kodak, don't you?" Oh, and that was it. Then she was off about photography and how did we process them and where did we do it. Well, you can imagine at the end of that, she left. And of course, all her entourage came after me, telling me off, "Why did you do that? Why did you hold her?" And I said, "Well, she's our queen. I can't tell her to clear off and go." She was asking me questions and I was answering them. So that was my interesting and very amusing meeting with the Queen and Prince Philip.
There you go, love it. Have you got any stories of when you met the Queen? Tell me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Obviously, we have the state funeral coming up on Monday. The cost of it, what will it be? Well, I can tell you, it's been criticised in an article in the New York Times, that publication, flagging up that the bill will be picked up by us British taxpayers. Not wasting a second to point out, of course, we are amid the cost of living crisis as we speak. Joining me now is is Surad Ahmari, who's the founder and editor of Compact magazine from New York. Good evening to you. What do you make of the article in New York Times, basically criticising the cost of the funeral, suggesting perhaps that it might be a step too far in this cost of living crisis?
Yeah, I guess insofar as I can apologize on behalf of the American journalistic class, that's a very silly article. There isn't much to say other than you can imagine, some editor or the line reporter being like, there's a funeral going on in Britain. It's a big deal. Who's going to pay for it? And the result is a lot of people, I think a lot of Britons are justly angry at what a kind of petty and stupid article it is in a moment that is somber and that where one would expect America's leading journalistic organ, our paper of record, to attend to more important things. On the other hand, I mean, it's, one shouldn't make too much of a big deal out of it either. It's a very typical journalistic gesture, right? So that something grand happens and you ask, is it the taxpayer that's paying it? Now, in the grand scheme of the cost of living crisis on both sides of the Atlantic, the funeral is actually probably a drop in an ocean. So again, it's very silly, but it's very typical also for the press in general and perhaps the American press especially.
Yeah, and just tell me, what has been the reaction over in America of the news of the Queen's passing?
Well, I think there's a great deal of Anglophilia among broad segments of the American population, and especially of a kind of love and respect for the royal family. Obviously, despite the rupture of the American founding with the continuity that we've been talking about on the segment, our revolution represents a kind of rupture with that continuity. Nevertheless, I think a lot of Americans look yearningly or nostalgically somehow at the royal family as this sort of visible symbol of national unity, of dignity, of continuity and tradition. So on the whole, setting aside what happens in Midtown Manhattan and the offices of the New York Times, I think the American people are extremely sympathetic and kind of almost obsequious, and that's precisely the right word amid a funeral toward the British royal family and the British people.
Thanks for that, Surad Ahmari. Thank you for your insight. Harry, where do you stand? Because there has been a bit of criticism about, of course, the UK is, like many countries actually, let's be honest, struggling a bit financially, let's put it mildly, cost of living crisis, and what's happening at the moment will indeed be costing a small fortune. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I can understand why Republicans would be angry, but the problem with tax is that it's not hypothecated individually. I can't say I'm only going to pay my PAYE for things that I approve of. Actually, this is a good example of something. You had an earlier poll saying 60 to 70% of people approve of the Queen and the monarchy more generally. I'd have thought, roughly speaking, that 60 to 70% of people would be happy to pay that the tax for that funeral. And actually, in general terms, it's a drop in the ocean. It's a bit of a false comparison, isn't it, to compare it to the huge amount of money needed for the energy cost of living crisis that Liz Truss was announcing just when the Queen died. This would be, I don't know, a matter of millions. We're talking about hundreds of billions to help people pay their electricity bills. So I think in the long run, it's a drop in the ocean, and most people in the country would be happy to pay, what is it, a couple of pounds per head at most.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy that my taxes are going to this at the moment because, as I said, I think, whilst of course it is a sad occasion if anyone dies, I do think this country needs a sense of togetherness, needs to reunite a little bit, come together. And maybe I'm being a bit deluded, but I hope actually that some of this togetherness, this sense of unity, the community, whatever you want to call it, I hope that we do manage to keep this going for a period of time. But Ashley, where do you stand on it in terms of taxpayer funds being spent on this stuff?
Well, of course, the monarchy is a key part of British identity. Whether you like it or not, that is how, Great Britain is viewed around the world. It's the place of all of the spectacle and the pomp and the show and the glitz and that sort of thing. And that's why people come to this country. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it's absolutely true. And the royal family has been going in the direction of Scandinavian countries for some time now in terms of a very slimmed down monarchy with fewer titles and a sort of streamlined system of titles. And that's expressly to keep the institution intact and to avoid having this sort of sprawling dynasty that gets more and more expensive and therefore potentially more controversial. They know, I think, exactly what they're doing. Actually, on that note, that's one thing that I found so impressive is just what a well-oiled machine the whole thing is. How much thought they gave to absolutely everything. Can't have the procession on a train from Balmoral, from Scotland, because this can happen. It's just really amazing. And I kind of wish that the rest of government kind of worked like that in a way.
The rest of the country, not just the government, by the way.
Yeah, the rest of the country. Of course, they've been planning. They've had a very, very long time to plan.
Pause your thought 1 second, because I just want to explain, if you're watching, what you're seeing again is the rotation of the guards taking place in Westminster Hall, of course. These rotations take place every 20 minutes. Guards apparently have 20 minutes on duty and 40 minutes off. So if you're wondering what was going on there, that's that switch over taking place. Again, sorry to interrupt, Ashley, as you were saying.
No, but that's what people come for. That's what people come to see. So it's a drop in the bucket compared to the draw of the royal family. And they've tried to keep it as small as reasonably possible. This has caused a little bit of controversy, obviously, with Meghan and Harry's children not receiving titles. But this was a decision that was made a long time ago to keep the institution intact and to try to keep the costs down as much as possible. But of course, you know, obviously the royal family can be very costly, but they do add a lot to the country in terms of your identity and why people come to see this country.
Yeah, and Harry, let's talk about the reaction to the Queen's death from, I don't know, let's just pick business as an example, because it has been it's a tricky thing to balance, you know, because we are in a national period of mourning, which is why, in case you're wondering why people are wearing black, that's why we're doing that. A 10-day period of national mourning. Then we've got the state funeral on Monday, which has now been declared a bank holiday. And when you run a business, you've got to be making the decisions about, right, how do we react and respond to this? And we've seen a variety of different businesses doing different things. We've seen a variety of responses. You know, some of them, to me, quite frankly, have been absolutely ludicrous. Some of the things that you've seen cancelled, I look at that and I think, what are you doing? It's a bit over the top to me, but anyway. And you've got brands, so like Center Parcs is one that's dominated a lot of the news recently. They decided that for people that were staying on a 7-day break, I think it was, if they were supposed to be in their holiday packs on the Monday, they were going to turf them out. I mean, it makes me laugh because I think it's ridiculous. They were going to turf these holiday makers out and let them back in again on the Tuesday. They've changed their mind on that a little bit. A bit of a PR disaster for them. But I guess it is quite tricky to decide the best way to react and respond.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I thought it was wrong to cancel last night of the proms. I thought it was wrong to cancel football matches. That actually, what I find really moving, like those pictures you've got here, is just the British population reacting to this extraordinary event. And it would have been wonderful at football matches. I'm sure 99% of the supporters would have sung wonderful songs in favour of the Queen. And last night of the proms, very patriotic occasion, would have been incredibly moving. And also, one of the wonderful things about the Queen that comes across is how diffident and modest she was. She wouldn't have demanded any of this. So I think most of these things shouldn't have been cancelled, and they should allow people to show their grief and mourning in everyday life. Some of the things I found really moving is in independent shopkeepers. There's one near my house in North London, a tailor, an old-fashioned tailor who's just got still open. She's got a big picture of the Queen in the front window. And those sort of instinctive responses are very moving, but he was still able to make you a suit if you wanted. So I think you can do both. You can stay open and show your grief.
Yeah, I found that very worrying, actually, that the default response was to just shut everything down. I thought, oh, well, are we used to this or something? I mean, was it really that difficult of a decision? Use your common sense. Do we need to cancel hospital appointments, for example? Did we need to cancel football? Really? I think I think the pandemic has set this precedent of a big event happens and we just shut everything down. And that is scary moving forward. I think people need to kick up a little bit more fuss about the disarray that bank holiday has caused, because we cannot allow that to continue. We can't just let, anytime a big event happens, our society shuts down. One thing that I'm very concerned about, and people have told me I'm overreacting, but I don't think I am, as the climate crisis looms closer, we are going to see that as the default response, I think. At least it's on the table in a way that it wouldn't have been in the past. So I think we need to be very careful about allowing that to happen in our societies in the future.
But that has already taken place. I mean, you say about the climate and stuff. I remember a couple of months ago, it probably was, my little boy's nursery cancelled their sports day because there'd been a heat wave, but the heat wave was only projected, I don't know, say 3 days, whatever. And then the sports day was after that. And they cancelled it as a caution. I was furious, but I digress. You know, and it's a tricky one because you can't please all of the people all of the time, because the flip side to what you're saying, Ashley, is that, you know what? The Queen, like we've seen what the royal family do now, the amount of service, duty, sacrifice, you know, they've put this country before their life. And actually, is it that much of a hardship just to press pause for a day and let people just, I don't know, just be? If you want to go watch the funeral, be part of it, just press pause for a day. Is that too much trouble?
I mean, we pressed pause for 2 years. I think we're done with that, to be honest.
But you can't conflate the two, though, can you? The COVID response versus the person that Ursula Liz Truss, the statement that she made when she was describing the Queen, I quote, as the rock on which modern Britain was built. The two are very different. This is a lady who has literally given her life in service to this country for 7 decades, and she's passed. And I mean, that's not the same as, you know, ridiculousness with COVID. And I worry that the two are being conflated.
Well, I think we've seen enough of like the NHS backlog, that sort of thing, to contribute to that. Because of a day of mourning, the knock-on effect is enormous. I think these sorts of things are life and death, and someone has passed away, but there are people still alive, like that need hospital care. Yes, okay, we can pause our banks and that sort of thing. We can take a day off school, but I think that was going a little bit too far. Way too quick to immediately think that had to happen. I mean, I just think that we were just too used to making people wait in terms of the NHS. I almost feel like well, you shouldn't be using the NHS anyway if you were careful enough. That's almost like the attitude that you get. That's just too quick to withdraw care from people. I think that should be really a last resort.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you on the NHS for sure. But you just can't please everyone all of the time. I mean, I'm looking at the inbox now and it's divided. You have lots of people writing in saying, you know, thank you for putting this attention on this historic moment. Then you've got other people writing in saying, Michelle, what are you doing? This is too much. Move on with life. And I have to say, like I described at the beginning of this, I was really on the fence. Which way should we take this? And then I just kind of think, you know, we've started, so we'll finish. We'll see this through the 10 days of national mourning, because you know what? This will never happen again. And, you know, the news, as we all say, it goes on, doesn't it? So we'll be picking back up on that on Tuesday. Someone just emailed in, Adrian, I think your name is, saying, Michelle, I've just seen one of your regular panellists in the queue paying his respects, but I can't remember his name. I missed him. Who was it? Which Dewbs & Co regular has just passed that screen? Was it someone that's stood in the queue, or was it one of those queue jumpers? You tell me, name him and shame him. Who was it?
Those people don't look disheveled enough to me, I think. I've been noticing, like, their hair still holds some curl. I don't know if you've been waiting 9 hours.
Well, you say that, but I was right at the front of the queue yesterday, so I was with people that have been sleeping on the street. And half of them look better than me. And I'd only just left my house, and I said to them, how on earth have you, like, maintained such a good sense of, like, togetherness if you've been on the street and it was raining, it had been previously raining and windy, and Anyway, when you do open up things, you let some people go ahead, Harry, some people just don't behave themselves, because I don't know if you saw the Celtic fans last night, they had banners up, sorry for your loss. They were talking about the guy that had broken into the Queen's bedroom. They were saying words that I can't repeat, but they weren't pleasant words, big banners. And you just look at that, and I just think it was disgusting and disgraceful, actually. So
yeah, it's not. It's unpleasant, but actually, that is the natural order of events. Is that there's going to be a small, idiotic minority. I mean, that idiot who was very rude at in the Edinburgh service. I mean, as I say, I'm perfectly happy for people to be Republicans. But there are tiny minorities. There was one man there in Edinburgh out of a crowd of, let's say, 100,000. So you're going to have a tiny percentage of people who are going to want to slightly show off and be unpleasant. It's not nice, but they are literally drowned out by the massive majority of people in this country.
Yeah, and I just look at those Celtic fans with those banners, and I just think, have a word with yourself. What on earth do you look like doing things like that at this time? The flip side of that was what they did at the Rangers. The Rangers fans, they did actually pay, I thought it was a beautiful tribute, actually. I don't know if you saw that. They did the kind of Union flag, and then they did the silhouette of the Queen. They did the anthem, and I thought that was pretty wonderful, albeit against the rules that they'd been set. They was told that they wasn't allowed to do that, but I found that a very respectful display, and exactly as it should be. We don't need to close absolutely everything down.
I tell you who was very dignified was when...
Tell me very quickly.
When King Charles went to Northern Ireland, that the nationalists understandably don't support the Queen, but I didn't see any signs of objection or bad behaviour from their side. And so you can oppose the Queen without being rude, can't you?
Yeah, of course. And there's a time and a place. You know, you can dislike anyone you want, but come on, just be sensible, I think.
Don't be rude, but you have a right to be rude, as everyone has a right to tell you off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't arrest people if they're rude.
Yeah.
Oh, no, definitely don't arrest people. No, we all agree with that. You don't need to arrest people just for disagreeing with you. One last viewer story just before we head off to Nigel. Alan Priest, he was telling us his experience of meeting the Queen when he was working as a junior gardener at Windsor Castle. Let's have a listen.
So this was back in the late 90s. I had the absolute fantastic honour of working as a junior gardener at Windsor Castle. Now, the senior gardener, the head gardener, was a lovely guy called Steve, and it was well known across the castle that Steve was on a diet, and this had been going on for a while. The Queen was a regular visitor to Windsor, and she'd quite often come out. She was always very interested to see what we were doing with the garden. She was very curious and asked lots of questions about the plants and the work that we were doing. And when she was out inspecting the plants, if Steve was otherwise engaged or busy elsewhere, she would often reach into a pocket, pull out a toffee and tell me, whatever you do, don't tell Steve. Yeah, it, really showed a side to her that the public didn't get to see. Really great memories for me. And yeah, she was a really remarkable woman, and she'll be greatly missed.
Oh, I love those stories. Have you got a royal story to share with me? Do let me know. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. I'll be sticking with the royals and resuming normal service back with the news on Tuesday. So get in touch with me with your stories. For now, Ashley and Harry, thank you very much for your time. Nigel Farage, you'll be keeping us company. Have you been down to the queue yet? I'm fascinated, Nigel.
I am broadcasting literally 100 yards away from the queue over Lambeth Bridge. I've been down there earlier. It is one of the most extraordinary and moving sights I have ever seen. We are witnessing the absolute best of Britain, and I intend tonight, in the hour I've got on GB News, to showcase all of that. It is remarkable. It is actually really rather beautiful. But before all of that, let's get the all-important weather.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. Another dry and bright day for most on Friday, perhaps a little more sunshine compared to today. Will be A bit of a chilly start, however, temperatures dropping quite sharply tonight. We've got high pressure out west and low pressure out east, and they're squeezing together to bring us northerly winds, and that's bringing the chill and also bringing quite a few showers across northern Scotland, and we'll see more through the evening and tonight coming down the eastern side of England, so from Durham down through Hull, Lincoln and towards Norwich. Some heavy showers possible. 1 or 2 scattered showers for North Wales, and later in the night parts of Cornwall. Elsewhere, though, most places dry and clear, and it will be a chilly one. Temperatures